Seeds are widely regarded as one of the best garage bands of the 60s, and their song Pushing Too Hard has earned a reputation as a proto-punk classic. Despite the fact that the group never achieved the same kind of success as other bands from Los Angeles such as the Byrds or Buffalo Springfield, the Seeds were a big influence on groups from that scene such as the Doors. Their simple, direct and raw approach to music also influenced bands like the Stogees, and as we will see later in the video, even the Velvet Underground. Let's take a look at the history of the band and let's explore the albums and singles they released from 1965 till 1970.
I can't seem to make you mine. Kissing around all the time.
The Seeds released their first single in July 1965. The band was formed earlier that year, and it featured Sky Saxon on vocals, Rick Andridge on drums, Jan Savage on guitar, and Daryl Hooper on keyboards. The group secured regular gigs at a club called Lido's, and they quickly gained a local reputation. I Can't Seem to Make You Mine enjoyed regional success, but it failed to chart nationally. The song, however, reached number 40 in the national charts a couple of years later when the single was re-released in April 1967. The song has become a cult classic over the years, and the track has been covered by numerous bands and artists such as the Ramones, Johnny Thunders, Alex Chilton, Yo La Tengo, and Garbage. The B-side of the single was a 50s-style rocker called Daisy May.
There's a May, there's a May, there's a May. Woo, you know I wanna love you and night and day. There's a May, there's a May, there's a May. You know I wanna love my life away.
Despite the fact that the band had just been formed, the group had already developed a unique signature sound characterized by Jan Savage's surf guitar style, Daryl Hooper's keyboards, and Sky Saxon's vocals. And Rick Andridge's simple but effective drumming style was the glue that held the band together. In a magazine interview several years later, keyboardist Daryl Hooper recalled,
"We didn't listen to a lot of outside music, the Stones maybe, but we didn't analyze it and copy it. We were really into creating our own music, something that we hoped the public would accept."
Oh, yes, this is the one, boys. You're pushing me too hard. Hey, loves, cool it, because I need you so.
You're pushing on me. You're pushing too hard. What you want me to be.
The band's biggest hit was released in November 1965. Pushing Too Hard is widely remembered as one of the biggest and most popular garage songs of the 60s. The track was featured on the influential Nuggets compilation in 1973 and earned a reputation as a proto-punk classic. But oddly enough, just like it happened with their first release, the single did not chart until it was re-released sometime later. The B-side was another killer song with some great fuzz guitar by Jan Savage.
It tears my heart out deep inside. Without your love, I want to die.
The single received airplay on radio stations such as Santa Monica's KBLA, but Pushing Too Hard remained largely ignored until the song was re-released in April 1966. Despite their lack of success, the Seeds entered the studio to record their first LP. The Seeds' first album remains one of the best garage rock records of the 60s. And unlike many albums from that era, the record only featured original songs. The album was full of highlights.
You know there's always someone wants to spoil your fun when your fun has just begun. It's time an evil who wants it all. No escape from your heart, no escape from your lips, no escape from your baby, your fingertips. When I see you standing there, get out there next to me on your bed. When there's a liar and a fool around, showing yourself all over the town.
Just a month after the LP was issued, the band's label released the song Try to Understand as an advanced single from the album.
Try to understand, everybody's searching for love.
The B-side, a song called The Other Place, was a track which was recorded during the sessions for their debut album, but was eventually not included on the LP.
No, I wanna take you, girls. I'll show you where it's at.
Pushing Too Hard was re-released as a single in April 1966, and the song was picked up by Wolfman Jack, who became a big fan of the band and constantly played the song on the radio. Keyboardist Daryl Hooper remembered,
We went on a tour
with Buffalo Springfield, and we're on this bus and listening to the radio station, and all of a sudden here comes Pushing Too Hard on the radio. And it says, this is number, I remember 20 on the charts, it hit it this and it's already climbing, and of course we were really excited. And by the time we got back to Los Angeles, in Los Angeles itself, we had a #1 record.
I know I was aware of the single Pushing Too Hard before starting the Stogees. That was something I'd heard and went, whoa, check this out. Not only was it great and had a great beat, but it gave hope to a simple young musician.
The Seeds released their second album in October 1966. The record still followed the garage rock direction of their debut album, but it saw the band evolving when it comes to sound and musical approach. Songs like Pictures and Designs predated the sort of sound that the Doors popularized a year later in 1967. When the Seeds started gaining popularity in clubs in 1965, one of the things that surprised audiences was the fact that they didn't have a bassist. On stage, keyboardist Daryl Hooper would perform the bass parts with a separate bass keyboard. This influenced the Doors to do the same. Shortly after the release of the Seeds' second album, the Doors toured the States as the Seeds' opening act. Daryl Hooper recalled,
We worked up and down the coast of California and Oregon of every college along the coastal route, and they were our opening act. I mean, Morrison did a lot of time sitting out in front learning Sky, different moves and different things. Very good musicians. I got along with the band fine. Morrison was very hard to get along with, very egotistical and very too much into drugs and alcohol. He'd get so blasted he'd forget the words of a song halfway through or even more than that and fall off the stage, and he was just hard to deal with.
Another band that seemed to be influenced by the Seeds was the Velvet Underground. Up in Her Room, which was the last song from the Seeds' second record, sounded very, very similar to Sister Ray by the Velvet Underground, which was released over a year later. Both songs were long tracks which turned into a wild improvised jam. The long jam at the end of Sister Ray is so similar to Up in Your Room that it seems unlikely that the similarities between both songs were just a coincidence. Both songs are regarded as forerunners of noise rock. The similarities between both songs have been discussed in several books about the Velvet Underground. Lou Reed and Company, however, never admitted to being influenced or inspired by the Seeds, but I think the similarities speak for themselves. The first single to be released from the Seeds' second album was Mr. Farmer. The song became a hit in Los Angeles, but only managed to reach number 82 on the Billboard chart. Daryl Hooper recalled,
I did write Mr. Farmer. I wrote all the music to Mr. Farmer. And I woke up early in the morning or whatever, and the tune, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, was going through my head. And then I went to Sky and I said, check this out. How about putting some words to it? And he did. And that's how that came about. It got banned in certain cities, like up in Montana or something, way back in the day. They banned it off the radio because they thought the farmer was growing pot.
I Can't Seem to Make You Mine, the Seeds' first single, was re-released 2 months later in February 1967, and it managed to reach number 41 on the national charts almost 2 years after its original release. The Seeds never managed to replicate the success of Pushing Too Hard, but 1967 was a very successful year for the group. The year was marked by raucous concerts, major coverage in the music press, numerous television performances, and even guest appearances on sitcoms such as The Mothers-in-Law.
See you later.
Yes.
Hey, we'll see all you flower people later.
Oh, groovy!
Bye.
Yeah, groovy!
That's what's happening.
The group also filmed an appearance on this movie starring Jack Nicholson and Susan Strasberg.
And the other one is super memorable is the Hollywood Bowl of 18,000 people. And some girl from the audience, at that time there was a pool in front of the stage, an ornamental pool, fairly large. And that was between the stage and the audience back in the day. And she jumped in the pool and ran out onto the stage and grabbed Sky, and they had to come out and take her away. And so again, very exciting, and playing for, large groups like that. It was a sold out 18,000 people.
Future, the Seeds' third album, was released in mid-1967 while the band's public profile was at an all-time high. The songwriting was still simple and direct and to the point, but the album saw the Seeds departing from the rawer tone of their previous hits and fully embracing psychedelia. The record featured a more expansive musical style, and the band utilized orchestrations and classical instruments in a psychedelic format. 1,000 Shadows was the first single from the album.
Now, called 1,000 Shadows, and it's done by the Seeds.
Run, little girl, just as fast as you can. Run like the wind.
The B-side of the single was a song called March of the Flower Children.
Come on along and go with me through the fairy castle now. Come on along and go with me back when you were a child.
Many people are not aware that the Seeds were the band that came up with expressions such as flower children or flower power earlier in 1966.
Charlie, they just told me to ask you what flower music is in 30 seconds. Can you do that?
Well, Mr. Clark, what I think it is, it's a reincarnation of youth. It's trying to bring back happy times, because I really don't think, this is my opinion, but I don't think, kids nowadays deserve to be called juvenile delinquents anymore. I think they're flower children.
1,000 Shadows fared better than Mr. Farmer, but still only reached number 72 on the Billboard Hot 100. Future peaked at number 87, and it was the last album by the Seeds to chart nationally. The Seeds' following single was released in October 1967.
We're up the sidewalk running down the street, showing our love to the world beneath.
The Wind Blows Your Hair is widely regarded as one of the group's best singles. But it was the beginning of the end for Sky Saxon and Company. Just a month after the release of the single, the group issued their fourth LP. A Full Spoon of Seedy Blues, which was released as the Sky Saxon Blues Band, saw the group take a completely different direction towards a style rooted in blues. The album featured liner notes written by Muddy Waters, who described the group as the American Rolling Stones. The record, however, was quite average, and it damaged the band's image on a national scale, which marked a decline in their commercial success. Releasing a blues-oriented album when psychedelic music was at the peak of its popularity was certainly not a very good idea. The group returned to the simplicity and raw tone of their early garage rock material in 1968 with the release of a live album called Raw and Alive. The album was actually recorded live in the studio with overdubbed audience noise, but it featured some of the most aggressive music the Seeds ever recorded. The record, however, went pretty much unnoticed. A couple of months later, the group released 2 songs from the LP as a single. But once again, the single was largely ignored. At this point, the Seeds had lost most of their fanbase, and the band's original drummer decided to leave the band. The Seeds fired their manager Lord Tim Hudson, and the group was saddled with major debt in the wake of his departure. Sky Saxon had gained a lot of money from royalties, and he was living comfortably in his hideaway in Malibu with a bunch of groupies who helped inflate his already inflated ego. But the rest of the band desperately needed to work regularly in order to have a salary. Keyboardist Daryl Hooper said,
Later on, he just wasn't that fun to be around, so it became more of a professional thing. We'll get together, we'll do our job, we'll do this, we'll do that, and then see you later, Sky. Because he got crazier and crazier and crazier. And I believe it was the drugs. And he was involved in the cult and stuff, and and he became and I'm not saying anything's wrong with being a vegetarian. I respect that, fine. But I don't need somebody sitting down at the breakfast table and telling me if I eat an egg, I'm going to hell. So he got crazy, and he was too much to handle. And he started, his lyrics got mold and didn't mean much sense. He was doing too many drugs, and his voice was getting worse, and he had about a range of 4 notes, and he just kind of back and forth, and I'll blame it all on the drugs.
The group released their last single for GNP Crescendo in January 1969. Both sides of the single were written and produced by Kim Fowley. Fowley met Sky Saxon through Marty Cerf, a Hollywood scene maker who published a magazine called World Countdown. Cerf also co-wrote both sides of the single. Undoubtedly, the highlight of this 45 was Falling Off the Edge of My Mind.
They say I'm going crazy, but they don't know what time now. Falling off the edge of my mind.
The song was very influenced by the country direction that bands like the Byrds had taken during that period. The B-side, a song called Wild Blood, was a decent track whose melody and riff seemed to be lifted from this song by the Trogs.
I saw you dancing, I went so wild, evil and screaming like the devil's child.
Original guitarist Jan Savage left the band after the release of the single. Several musicians came and went, and it took the Seeds over a year to get signed again. The group signed to MGM and released a new single in August 1970.
I was born on a very bad part of the town.
The song featured some truly aggressive guitar work, very much in the style of the first album by the Stogees. The B-side was a generic mid-tempo tune called Wish Me Up.
Wish me up, wish me up, wish me up a dream.
The group released their last single in November 1970. The highlight was undoubtedly the B-side.
Torture, torture on the hill. How many good men have been killed?
Did He Die was an anti-war song which was reminiscent of the sort of proto-punk material that came to define the Seeds' early recordings.
He shot him in the head. He killed his brother.
Keyboardist Daryl Hooper left the band shortly after the release of this single, and that was the end of the band. A mysterious 45 by a new incarnation of the Seeds was released in 1972. But apparently, the single didn't even feature Sky Saxon. Sky Saxon and the Seeds remained largely forgotten until 1973, when the Essential Nuggets compilation sparked a bit of interest in garage bands from the 60s. The punk rock explosion of the late 70s and the appearance of several revival garage bands later in the 80s sparked more interest in 60s garage rock. And all this, coupled with a major re-release campaign of forgotten groups from the 60s, helped give the Seeds the recognition they deserve as punk pioneers and as one of the best garage bands from that era.
Sky was a great guy. He would give you the shirt off his back. Very talented person. He definitely could write songs. Definitely a character, and definitely cut from a different mold. It's just very too bad. I think he got so wrapped up in drugs. I think it really affected his life, and he anything that was kind of more on the edge of being not so fun to be around, that drug thing would take it further. Back then, of course, those terms weren't used. We were just playing rock and roll, but I think our music was the beginning stages of what turned into punk, or what turned into what nowadays are called garage music. I guess we were that then,